Welcome to today's session of City Scripts, which is a book discussion on Rising Suns by Kavery Nambisan. I'm Asha from the Word Lab at IHS, and City Scripts is our monthly curation of book talks, panel discussions, lectures, and more that bring the city alive. I'm very happy to introduce today's speakers. Kaveri has written several novels, including The Scent of Pepper and A Town Like Ours, as well as non-fiction works like A Luxury Called Health. She's a trained surgeon and has worked in rural Bihar, UP, Tamil Nadu, and Karnataka. She was married to the late poet and writer Vijay Nambisan. Thank you so much for being here, Kaveri. We're very happy to have you. Our moderator for this evening is Arshia Sattar. She's a scholar and translator of Indian epics. She holds a PhD from the University of Chicago and has translated Valmiki's Ramayana. She co-founded the Sangam House Writers Residency and was awarded France's Order of Arts and Letters in 2023. I translated it to English because I didn't want to impose my bad French on anyone. Thank you both for being here, and over to you, Arshia.
Thank you, Asha. Hello, Kaveri. Kaveri and I are old friends, but this is actually the first time we're doing something public together, though we are colleagues in a different space. And it's of course, it's always a great pleasure to be speaking to a friend, but it's always a little odd as well, because you think you know somebody and then you read their bio and then you read their novel and you're like, oh, okay. So Kaveri is one of those remarkable people who wears many hats. And certainly I think one of the important features of her life story is that she has always been very interested in social medicine, as she's a trained surgeon. Thank God she's a trained surgeon. I can't imagine an untrained surgeon. But she's always worked in hospitals that cater to the marginalized, to the disadvantaged, to people who have very little access to formal medicine. And I think a lot of that comes out in this book in very different ways. So what I thought we'd do is, what I wanted Kaveri to do is to get us started by reading a passage from the novels, so you all get a sense of it, and better that you have a sense of it in her voice, because then when you read the novel, that will be the voice in your ears. Yeah? So will you read us a little passage, and then we can talk about it in greater detail.
This book deals with, predominantly it deals with caste and politics, but through the eyes of one family, an ordinary family living in rural Karnataka. So that is the setting, in a very, very small village. And I thought I'll read you a passage which is, although it is small, it's a pretty important one in the book. We all know about the sacredness of symbols in religion, in every religion, symbols and customs, traditions. And there are people who would get very offended if something that was a tradition was transgressed, And here we have, this book is set about 100 years ago. To start with, it's about 100 years. So these sort of that type of thing was far more, it was stronger. And so there were many, many events around that. But here, what do you do when it is a young girl who has defied some custom, a 9-year-old girl? What do you do when it is not a human being, but an animal, which has transgressed some human sacred tradition or custom or symbol, anything, okay? And here we are talking, since we are in Karnataka, I can say, we are talking about a tulasi katte. The tulasi plant, which is in front of a house, which is a sacred plant for most of us who are Hindus, and we sort of, light a lamp, worship, all that. So, but a dog certainly wouldn't know about this. So here we have a girl, 9-year-old girl, Chinny, who has a muddied black pup has adopted her, so to speak, and they're very close to each other, and. Both of, I mean, she communicates with the dog not in words, but in what she thinks is what a dog would want to be communicating, the way. So she doesn't use words. Okay, and when he does something wrong, she will chastise him, and he repents, and he goes away to think about his ill conduct. So here we have, after one such telling off by Chinny for trying to tease a scorpion, a penitent Kupu is the name of the dog, a penitent Kupu wandered off in pensive contemplation of his misconduct. Kupu was a curious fellow, and although he meant no harm to anyone, he liked nosing around. He presumed that adults were overgrown kids. Thus it was with the friendliest of intentions that he ventured into the Brahmin quarter of dogless families. Greeted with anger, stones, sticks, words of caution, which he strongly disapproved of, he walked away in a huff. On his way out, thoughtfully reflecting on their manners, he raised his hind leg and urinated over the tulasi katte that graced the front yard of Keshava Pujari's home. So nothing could be, more terrible. And the Pujari saw it. Can you blame him for what followed? Bellowing with rage, he charged at the dog and struck him with a cane. On his snout, on his eyes. And Kupu was furious and tried to charge at his shin and got beaten more. And he ran pell-mell, helpless, overturning the gleaming chombu of water, ready at the doorway for visitors to wash their feet. The welcome splash of cold water on his wounded face partly cleared his vision, and he escaped. So how is the weapon, the cane, benign, you are asking? Parents and teachers use it on, please remember it's 100 years ago. Parents and teachers use it on children. Goat herds, cow herds, and farmers use it on their animals. The landlord uses it on his serfs. And on dogs, everyone uses it. If there are rules for caning that are written down, I do not know them. So I'll stop there and I'll read a little more later.
Thank you, Kaveri. I remember this passage so clearly. I remember the subsequent part as well, but I'm not going to tell you what happens. The first thing that struck me about this novel when I was reading it, without any spoilers, this is a good old-fashioned novel. It is sprawling. It is over 100 years. It is a village. It is many, many characters. It's animals. It's the past is a character. The future is a character. People appear. People disappear. One of my favorite characters disappeared, but I'll talk to you about that separately. But when I started reading this novel, it reminded me a lot of Anantamurthy's Samskara. And as I read further and further, it reminded me, it sits for me in a tradition of the great Kannada novels, right? Usually written by men. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about that, about how you see yourself in a larger tradition of writing. It's a very, very Kannada novel. There's a lot of Kannada in it. The food, the clothes, the rituals, the locations, the landscape. So it felt very familiar to me. Would you place yourself in that tradition?
I usually, I think for a writer, I discovered long ago that it is very important to really, when you're writing, to forget your gender. and not think from gendered terms in that sense, at the same time retaining it inside you. But I think as a writer, you have to rise above the gender. And I try to do that sort of without feeling self-conscious about that. And Kannada for me, since I've grown up in Kannada environment, and I've studied in Kannada medium school till I was about 12, and I've read a lot in Kannada. So I feel comfortable translating what is like, dialogue will be in Kannada, but in my mind, I'll translate it to English. So that's how I worked on it.
No, I didn't mean at all that you were writing as a man. I was suggesting how lovely it is to actually have that space occupied by a woman writer, because we tend to think that women's novels are small, right? That we write about our immediate environment, we write about our kitchens, we write about our children, we write about our husbands. But this is a fell swoop novel. It's huge. So I was going to ask you about history as literature as history. But then when I went to your Wikipedia page, I realized that so many of your previous novels also are historical, or rather, they're not historical in the sense that they're period pieces, but history is a very important strand in them. And there's another novel that also covers 100 years. There's another novel. Yeah. So I'm curious about that. Why is history such an important part of your literary landscape?
I think I've always been very sort of spellbound by history of different eras, but particularly for me, the generation when probably our parents and grandparents were very, very young. From that time onwards, I'm fascinated because it's so close that you can almost touch it. And yet it is not something we have ourselves experienced. For instance, the freedom struggle and how it first started and how it went, the early years of the freedom struggle. And then also the later years. I mean, those really gripped me for three reasons, because it was a period in the history of our country when we seem to have produced a lot of great people. I mean, people who could really put down all their personal biases and then unite to try and fight against the colonial oppression. That was the big thing. And because of the Satyagraha movement and all that it involved, like the village movements and, the various things that joined in and became, the Congress party finally, but all that happened before it. And you can see that people came from different parts of India, and most of them obviously were from peasant backgrounds. There'd have been small villages they came from, and then they went and they got educated. Most of them did law, they went abroad. There were so many things, but there were so many diverse people. There were people from Bihar, from small villages in Karnataka, from Maharashtra, women, I mean, not just men, but women we had. So that somehow thrills me, to think that they could rise above their personal, ambitions and do something like this. And particularly the period also from, I would say, 46 to 49, when the Constitution was written and, framed. How these men, there were 300 people who did it, or 299 members of the Constituent Assembly. And it was a period, 46 to 49 was a period of terrible violence in India. The partition, the tragedy was just there. It was next door, especially in northern India. And I'm sure every one of those members would have had personal, things, issues, people to think of and worry about and feel anxious about. And in the middle of that, they sat and wrote this, and they framed it, and they discussed and talked, and they had so much of a, wisdom and sagacity, and that one type of stillness of mind to put down what is for future generations and not think only of that thing and try to. So to me, that distant vision that they showed to put down the Constitution, that also means a lot to me.
No, I mean, our constitution is a truly, truly beautiful document. And of course, it's under threat now. And we have to also be very aware of that in the way that, we live our lives even in this time. But I think also, I know how important the freedom movement in the early years after independence are to you personally because of your family history and the people in your family that participated in this moment of idealism. And but what I enjoyed very much in the novel is the political participation or the political awareness of our characters. Starts much earlier. We're talking about Bhagat Singh, we're talking about Lala Lajpat Rai. There's this young girl. She said the first love letter I ever wrote was to Bhagat Singh, but he never responded, right? And also, so I think there's a lot of your very personal, very subjective politics in the book, not simply in the story of independence, but the kinds of characters that you're writing about and what happens to them. And where, yeah.
Yes, I think you're right. You got your finger on it. I've written a lot that has been personally, maybe remotely, experienced in certain ways about politics, but also the fact that, for instance, because my father was in the freedom movement, and when he went to prison 3 or 4 times, a total of about 3.5 years, he was in prison. And there was a time when my mother was carrying their first child. So the trauma of these people had to face, or the difficulties they had to face, both those who were left behind and those who went, and my father was young. And so, they got through all that, and they were able to take that. And my father actually dropped out of college at the age of 19 or so. And but he says that the prison gave him education, because they used to hold classes, they used to have lectures by the senior leaders, like Rajgopalchari and the various people who were there, men and women. They took classes for them and taught them different things like law and philosophy and history, politics, so many things. So that was fascinating to listen to, and all about, so many things. I'm not, my father never discussed politics with us as such, but I think I was a precocious child who sort of listens into adult conversations and makes up comes to her own conclusions or whatever. But yeah, that was there. And I never thought I need to research for the book. I didn't do research. I just wrote it. But I was also at the same time avidly reading the newspapers, meaning now, I mean, I read it regularly. So I used to get news, of the past, especially when 75 years came. There were a lot of articles being written about what happened in different parts. So it was connecting with my book. They were just sort of, so I found that gave the flow, because I got the confidence that, okay, what I'm saying is actually, this is true. For instance, the Seva Dal, how the Seva Dal was formed, and how the two people who formed this, the person who formed the Seva Dal and who became a senior person in the Congress, Seva Dal merged with the Congress. And this happened in Bengal when they had one of the Congress meetings, and when Mahatma Gandhi was the president. And the two boys who were in school, benchmates in school, later became, one joined the Congress and one started the Hindu Mahasabha and the thing. So all these, fantastic stories that are there in our history. And I really wanted particularly to trace, of course, the family, this family story. So it all, somehow came together. Yeah.
I also thought it was a very pointed book for this moment, for 2025 in India, in terms of how these are precisely the histories that are being erased. Yeah, they're being forgotten also because that generation is passing, but there is a more malicious erasure also involved. So I was very moved by that in this book, and I hope that it won't be just gray hairs like us who read this, but I hope that young people will also engage with that historical narrative and not simply the narrative of the village. Yeah. So you say you didn't read. It is so detailed, Kaveri. I mean, the flora, the fauna, this kupu, the eye people, who's wearing what kind panche, who's wearing, which kind of sari. It's very cinematic. But one of my favorite parts is that it starts sort of with these two young girls in an orphanage. I love that part. And I can see that, so much of the description, it's places that you've been. You have grown up in rural India. You have, even as a professional, as an adult professional, you've returned to villages. Now, surely that is in the writing. That timelessness. So it's called Rising Suns. Yeah. But the women are fantastic.
Strong.
Yeah.
To stress that because somebody did ask me somewhere that.
Somebody did ask me, why Rising Suns? Why are you talking about the men rising? Why not? But actually, although it is called Rising Suns and it is about the two sons, but there are women in the book who are very strong and who have a life of their own and who's got individuality. They are sort of specific people. So although I'm not making it a women's novel or men's novel, but I think if you want to find strong women, you'll find them there. You do find them. Sure.
They're actually stronger than the men in a sense. The men take the paths that are available.
Yes.
Chalo, freedom movement, I will join. Yes. Oh, politician, okay, I will join.
Correct, correct.
That. They're not looking for ways to be, whereas the women have to forge their own path. Very, very much.
Yeah.
Gauru, of course, is fantastic. Yes. But I want to talk about the caste thing because it's quite complex. And it happens across the novel, not just in the solid middle. It plays out in the lives of many characters. And the other thing that I was thinking, of course, when I was reading this, Kantapura came to mind, also in terms of the way castes exist together in rural areas, which has a terrible cruelty to it, but it also has a very beautiful functionality. Everybody knows what they're supposed to do and they do it. Right? But it also reminded me of 100 Years of Solitude. Just this community that is so diverse, as all communities are. Some people are like this, some people are like that. So how would you like to tell our audience people what the caste matter is in the book? I'm being very careful because
again, when I started the book, honestly, I had no grand plan in mind. The only urge in me for a long time was that I do want to write about something about politics of that era, which I seem to have some sense of, So, that was there, but I didn't know how I was going to do it. And when I had a vague idea of someone who's from somewhere, a village, and then finally he ends up in Delhi, So that was the only thing that I had, one very thin string. And then when I usually spend about 6 months or 1 year thinking about a novel, before I write it. So I had that, then I started, putting here and there that this is what. But then I thought, I can't just write this. Who's this guy? I mean, I have to put him somewhere and to find out his family. So I decided I'd form his family. So I created a family for him. I created Devaraya. I created the family. So that sort of interested me so much. I forgot the politics bit. I just got so involved in the rural life. It's like looking in a small puddle of water. You can just look at it and see just maybe the trees and all this. But if you look very carefully, you see the little worms and little fish, God knows what else, wriggling around, and you can get fascinated with that. So that way I got fascinated with the village and the family. And that's how that, blew up into something. And the pattern, and it just came like that. I never thought I was going to write about caste. Devaraya wasn't going to do what he was going to do. I mean, that revelation came to me much later, you see. So that was not there in my...
Got a real shock, I have to say.
Yeah, you must. Everybody gets a shock there. But I myself got a shock in the sense that that's it. So then I that became another like a thread to the story, and it moved it forward in a stronger way. So the story really was very much organic in that sense, that it grew out of me. Also, I found it flowing easily. The flow was easy. I wasn't getting stuck somewhere. It was flowing. And thanks to Sangam House, actually, I was in Sangam House when I was writing the this. And just the final parts of it I was doing, but I hadn't yet finished. And certainly hadn't finished. So that's thanks to the residency program that Arshia is a part of, she runs. And I was once over there, very fortunately. And so that was the thing. It just came. As I said, I had a very vague idea of something, and then it ended up as something much, much, much bigger than what I thought. And I was myself aghast when I saw the size. I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be a very big book, And then I, of course, cut down and tried.
So it's really true that characters develop their own lives?
See, mine...
As a writer, how are you involved in that process?
No, I think characters... of course, the writer controls the character. We create the characters. Right? Then after that, I try to make the character as authentic as possible in my mind, that this person is authentic. He exists or she exists. And after that, I try not to control them too much. In the sense, I give them space. I move away and I let them think, that way. That's what I feel. I respect the characters. Once I get that closeness to them that I've created, and they seem to flesh out. After that, I try to leave them alone. And when people say they've got a writer's block, I have never faced a writer's block. No, what I mean is I do face this thing of waiting for a character to start doing something. But that's not a block. I mean, it's just that the character is taking time. And I have also found in at least 2 major areas of the book, I found that I was trying to tell the character, please don't do this.
Who's the other character that was...
I didn't want him to do what he did. And then I said, oh no, this is good. But he wanted to do it. Finally, I had to allow him. I had to say, okay, go ahead. I mean, your life, So I really give them space. That's what I mean. Yeah. You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Devaraya is one of my... every time he appears on the page, my heart used to lift because he's very, very interesting. He's very complex. He is complicated. He is righteous. He's very lovely. So there is Anna, who is his son. Now I'll say, I talk about 2 characters. It's not a big giveaway, but Chinni and Anna are both deaf in one ear. And they're deaf in opposite ears, and they grow up together, they're children together. And so they say, okay, we'll be partners. Yeah, we'll walk together because you can hear from this ear and I can hear from this ear. I thought that was very, very sweet. But
I had a tough time working it out.
Yeah.
Thinking of how it is one ear.
But again, so this is like a writerly thing. Why are they both deaf? Why do they both lose hearing?
It was just a thing, a sort of something that happened that brought them together as kids, as children they grew close. So
it's very, very sweet.
And Chinni also says that God is probably deaf in the left ear like me, so God is a woman, she.
She's a real little sparkler, that Chinni. So. Is it easier for us all as people who experience the patriarchy, is it easier for us to write about fathers and sons than it is to write about mothers and daughters, really?
I don't think so. I think both are equally challenging. And I mean, I have a feeling there will be people who won't like the book, particularly because it challenges patriarchy in a certain way. And yeah, it does. And there may be people who will not like it. And I don't mean to, for me, patriarchy is something I have defied, or I would defy when I'm faced with it. But we exist in the middle of it, and we are a part of it. And in many ways, we have to, it is not that we can challenge it completely. We have to work our way, negotiate our way through it. So, that is one thing. And also about caste, although I think I'm from a privileged position, I'm writing, about caste. But at the same time, I mean, there are people who will say, oh, what's your business, talking about all this. But I think it is everybody's business to talk. It's everybody's business. And because although we say legally the caste system is abolished, you can't, have caste prejudice, but we see it every day, So I thought, put focus on that in a real life, in the life of real person.
No, the other thing, of course, is this is a shockingly political novel, yeah. And because you write so gently, and your persona is also so gentle, people notice, "Oh, Kavery Nambisan it is extremely political for all the reasons that you just mentioned. For caste being at the center, really, really at the center of the novel, the constancy of the shadow of the patriarchy. It is always there. Yeah, it falls upon the men, it falls upon the women, it falls upon the country, it falls upon the village, the nation, everything, right? Plus, there is this contested history, right? Do you think literature and history should be handmaidens? Should they be partners? Should they be companions?
It's difficult question to answer, but I do think both are very relevant to our times. And I'm so glad we've got strong historians writing here in India, and we've got strong novelists. We need more. We need more fiction that is strong, because fiction has a way, I think history, of course, I mean, there's no taking it away. History is very, very essential. The more we understand history, the better it is for us. But I think fiction has such a big part to play, because we are really going into those areas of history which historians cannot visit. Historians cannot visit a family. They cannot visit. I mean, they've got to stay with the history. So we can enter families. We can enter the backyard. We can go everywhere and into their minds. We can see what is going wrong, why the bad decision was made, why what. But so many things. And I think that gives fiction a sort of strength, which if people would read more fiction and try to understand this human sensibility, and how people who are not like us behave, and why do they behave like that. I mean, we always, this wonderful thing about being nice to the person who's nice to you, and that's very easy to do. I mean, I can be very, very nice person if somebody else is nice to me, but it's when they're not nice to me, then you must see me. I mean, so fiction brings out so much of these human flaws and strengths, everything. So I think fiction has a big part to play in today's context all over the world, where we are forgetting these things. Everything, I mean, right up to AI, we think that they're all, I mean, we're all up there. So we think we are just growing vertically and or whatever. But the reason to grapple with humanity and to grapple with human flaws and to understand them, for that you need fiction. So certainly history and fiction are important. Sure.
That's a very lovely thing you said, Kaveri, that we can go where historians can't. We can go into the backyard, we can go into somebody's mind, and sort of, and a novel like this one, I think, reminds us of something very important, that history is created also by human beings, that as when we read traditional histories, oh, Gandhiji is up there, oh, Sardar Patel is up there, there's a there's an aura, there's a great distancing. And we forget that they love their children, their dog got beat on the nose by somebody else, their heart lies in Kashmir, whatever it is. And it is really fiction that can open up these these spaces of the mind and the heart. I noticed there was a very small, very gentle slap on the wrist to Gandhi in the book. So how do you fit real historical characters?
See, to put it, I'm a great admirer of Gandhi. Okay, from my very young days, young meaning maybe I was about 15 or 16 when I read My Experiments with Truth, and it was such a, I don't know, it was a wonderful book. I still love it. It's one of my favorite books. I was attracted towards two things in Gandhi. One was his honesty, and the other was his austerity. Both are things hard to follow. But having said that, I don't agree with Gandhi in everything. I mean, if I was to face him somewhere and if I got the chance, there would be a lot of things I would ask him, that way. And I think he would listen, he wouldn't mind. I don't think Gandhi was the type who would take offense to disagreements. He had to face it all the time. So that was not,
Yeah, but that's another thing that, I'd sort of, I'm floating along in this book, like it's a fictional narrative of not events necessarily of a time that we know about, right? Certainly our generation remembers that history. I don't know what's going to happen to people younger than us if that history is going to have any place at all in the way they think about their country. But I was like, and then suddenly, oh my God, here's Gandhiji. Not that he actually appears, but there's a very, very clear and critical reference to him. And that, I thought that was very, very cleverly done, to actually bring in a historical person who has no impact on the story at all. But
and I think it's important to be able to admire people and yet know that they are not, high up on a pedestal and just there. They're also human beings. They also have their flaws, and we need to understand that so that we can also become it gives us also a hope that we don't have to remain, in some sort of spaces.
Would you have written a love letter to Bhagat Singh asking him to marry you?
I think I'm the type.
So in that sense, again, it's a very, very personal book. I started, I said earlier, it's a deeply, deeply political book. But it's also I cannot imagine anybody else writing this book. I honestly can't. It is so you. And yet not, which is the mark of a great fiction writer. So we have about 15 minutes left. Would you all like to enter the conversation with comments or questions or... Why don't you read us another passage, Kaveri, and that will maybe help people gather their thoughts a little bit.
I'm just going to continue with the part, after skipping a little bit, when Kupu gets beaten and he's really bloodied and very badly injured. And then Chini's family brothers, they come, they help, and the dog is attended to. Everything is done for the dog. And then Chini goes back to the pujari's house. The pujari came out of the Bachalumane, that is the bathing room, shed near the well where he had gone for bathing, and was about to step into the house when Chini's flushed face appeared at the gate.
You beat Kupu, you ugly old Rakshasa. You beat him in the face. The wife, plucking Dasavala flowers for the evening puja, stopped in disbelief. It is Bhagavati's child, the Tabali, that is the orphan. What impudence! The pujari says, "Hey, you bold wretch, get out of here this minute and mind that dog, or I'll finish him once and for all." Chinny was already walking away, but she had picked up the cane that was leaning against the wall with which he had beaten Kupu. She stopped at the Tulasi Katte that was a few feet from the front gate and, swinging the cane, cut the plant to pieces. Oblivious to the hollering pujari and his shrieking wife, she kicked the mud platform that formed the Tulasi Katte. Finding that it only hurt her 9-year-old foot, she picked up a stone she could hardly lift and, with a surge of strength, threw it against the katte, breaking an edge. Once broken, it fell apart quickly with each blow and kick. The red powdered mud rose in a cloud of dust around the girl. A group, mainly of school-going children, had gathered at the gate. Someone pulled her away. I don't want to tell you what happens to the girl because there are serious consequences to this, but I just want to leave it there.
So sweet Kupu comes back for a cameo appearance. I was just like, oh my goodness. Yeah. What is that for you? Is it tying up a loose end? Is it a favorite character that you couldn't let go of?
I'm partly because I am very fond of dogs and cats, and I love them. I really love them. But also, yeah, he was also a difficult character to let go because you care for a character deeply, and then I myself want to know what happened, because I didn't know what happened to Kupu because he did vanish. I didn't know what happened, and later I was thinking, what happened? What happened? So I brought him back in some other way. Yeah, yes.
Questions from anybody?
Oh, I'd actually like to say something. When I will admit I haven't finished it because I was halfway through reading it, then I had to send it. But there was a scene where you're describing people at a chai shop reading the newspaper, or someone's reading the newspaper, and also just the idea of how you read the newspaper from Monday to Sunday. And it's such a journey, right? So you read it from cover to cover, and you don't miss a single article, and those who can't read are waiting with bated breath, and everything from if it's a 5-day match for cricket, each edition gives you the score, and there's so much anticipation around just being read the newspaper. So one thing, it was just such a lovely scene, but also was it based on stories that you heard and how people sort of got the news, because it's so far removed, but everyone's so involved with what's going on in that moment.
See, I think it's partly because of experience. I don't get the newspaper home, but I get it when I go into town. So I get 3 days worth, 4 days worth. When we lived in Bihar, Vijay and I, we used to get papers, very late, a week later. But we got the Patna news. There were two. There was a Times Patna and there was The Nation. And those were really local Bihar news. But you wanted national news, you had to wait a long time. And then if you got any, you always did it that way, no? You start with because you're so excited that you've got newspaper and then you're reading, have you finished? Give it to me. Okay, that type of thing. So, yeah, so the village is doing exactly that because they get it only once a week. So when they get it on Sunday, they start with the previous Monday and then they go forward, yes.
I don't know if I would have the discipline to do that. But there's also a character who gets really irritated because the score is in the wrong order. They read about the victory before they read it. Yeah. Okay, I have to ask about somebody I really missed at the end of the novel. Nanju.
Yeah. See, again, I personally don't know. Again, he's not there at the end of the book. He's still not appeared, but his story may not have ended. You know, the novel ends, but the story of the people in the novel hasn't ended. You know, so I can't tell you for sure what happened. I've got thoughts about it, but I'm going to leave it. I'm not writing a sequel or anything. Don't worry. But what I mean is, I've got various things of what could have happened. I think it's left to the reader's imagination sometimes, where you feel, there are certain things that you
I
leave
think
it
that's
that way.
so charming that you still think about Nanju.
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
I just the other day I was thinking. I was. Yes.
I always thought writers had more control over how they end things or characters that complete their narrative arc. I thought all that is in the writer's hands, but clearly it's not.
No, not really.
Yeah.
No.
Sorry, I got the mic, so I'll go first. It struck me when you talked about the fact that the novel doesn't have to always grow vertically in time.
Speak louder.
So I kind of it struck me when you talked about the idea of the novel not always having to grow vertically, time always having to move forward. And So then, what is this? How does one develop this? The plot, or rather, your novel, horizontally. I'm kind of like very like. When you spoke about that, I thought it was a fascinating idea, and I became slightly obsessed with that thought.
So for me, it is like I do keep in mind that you have a storyline, but because this book has got a host of characters, there are so many characters who are all interesting in their own way, and they have their lives, they have their family. There's so much going on in each family. So you have to, go sideways as well, and you have to sometimes go back and then come forward. And but at the same time, you keep the skein of thought and the skein. It's like, I think, somebody was saying novels are patchwork. I don't think it's a patchwork quilt that you do, but I think it's a skein. The thread which has multiple shades of pink or something, and then one is dark and but some thin out, some are thick. So you just gently take those skeins along and see where they go, because life is like that. Life is not going to give you one straight answer or one straight road towards where it is going to end. You go in all sorts of ways, in fact, unimaginable ways. So I think a book too should, if it demands, you have to move in all directions.
Sorry, I missed most of your talk and I haven't read your novel yet. But I'm just curious about what's on the cover. What's the black thing?
Sorry?
What's on the cover? The black.
The thing?
It's a rope?
Yeah, it's a rope, which is frayed.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
I don't have a question per se, but as one of the early readers of the book, I just want to say that it had me enthralled. I remember. As one of the early readers of the book, I just want to say the novel had me enthralled. I remember I received it at a point where I had multiple back-to-back deadlines, and I said, okay, this is a vast novel. It's going to take me a while to finish. But actually, surprisingly, didn't, because once I started reading it, I absolutely could not pull myself away, which I think it's full credit to the quality of your writing, and the way you have moved plot and also married plot with language. Which brings me to a question. You're also a surgeon, and the precision with which you use language. Do you feel your career as a surgeon has had an impact on the care with which you use words? There's this fineness to it, almost like a cut that's perfect.
Actually, no. I think surgery hasn't taught me that precision or given me that. I think it was Vijay, my husband, who was, he was a fantastic writer, and he had that respect for words, and he knew how to, so I learned from him, I think, because Vijay was one who not only wrote well, but even if we were having an argument or a fight,
and my language, slipped anywhere, he'll correct me. And I'll tell him, stop correcting me. I'm fighting, I mean, but there was, I mean, it was driven into me that time. I knew how to use language because I'm not a self-conscious writer. I'm not self-conscious when I write. My wrists are loose and I just write. Even if the grammar is wrong, everything, I'll just write and then I will correct it. That was always my way. But Vijay taught me something more about how to, to go after that correct word, the right way. I mean, not that he told me exactly what to do, but if he read something, and I could tell if he liked it or didn't like it, why. I mean, even if he didn't say it, and also reading his work. And that helped me to think how every sentence, every paragraph must, have that resilience to stand by itself as a good sentence or a good para. Yeah. So surgery didn't do it for me. I don't think so. Although surgery itself is very precise, but I think surgery may not have taught me. Surgery is teamwork. And you need your team around you, and you need to have this skill, and you need the memory, and you need to have learned all this and everything. But the thing that surgery taught me is, in surgery and in writing of fiction particularly, you need to take a certain type of risk. I mean, it's not a risk that you go cutting anybody saying, I'm going to do. I don't mean it that way, but you're taking the risk of allowing readers, into your thoughts. You're putting your thoughts out there. And so you need to have that courage. Okay, somebody is going to read this, never mind, let me write it. So surgery also, there are times, especially we are in rural areas. I mean, okay, I will only do things where I feel I am proficient. But at the same time, if something went wrong, there would be nobody to help me, in a rural area. So I have to have my wits about me, really. So there is a sort of discipline you learn, I think, from surgery for that, yes. This one, sorry.
So revealing of the writer. Everybody says, fiction, it's all like that is not the point. It says a lot about who's writing. Sorry.
No, I think to me, I think it was just the conversation that I thought it evoked something in the way that in this moment that we are, when there's so much polarization, there's so much anger, and everyone's taking such strong positions. I think you're talking about politics, and you're talking about the novel in a way that it's deeply political, but it also seems like there is a lightness to it, and there's also the possibilities of making mistakes, and the fact that we're all human, and that in this political moment, to not forget that. And I think that's really what I think. Even when you were talking about patriarchy and caste, and that we are in the middle of it, and that we are not, whether as men or women, we are not on extreme ends of it, looking at the other with accusation. But I think to recognize that we are all in it together, and that we are all struggling in it. In different ways. I mean, I don't mean to say that there's no power, there's no oppression, there's no none of that. But in the middle of all that, I think to not forget our own humanness. And I can't wait to read the novel. I'm just so excited. And I think, thank you for talking about it in the way. I think both of you did such a fabulous job of talking about it. Yeah.
Chalo, everybody go buy the book. That's the best way to say thank you to Kavery. So please, really buy the book. I can't wait to give this novel to my mother. Actually, my mother's 96. And this is exactly the kind of novel that you say, oh, something real to read, finally. I take her other stuff which doesn't delight her as much as this will. Thank you, Kavery.
Thank you, Arshia. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.